Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, lady back there.
Recently in the press,
Can you speak up?
yes, there have been reports in the press of a trip made by Senator Warner to the Middle East, and he came back. I don't have a microphone. He came back from the Middle East, and he, along with a number of generals in the Defense Department, have advised the president that they feel he needs to reevaluate the course of action in Iraq. Could both of you please comment on that issue?
Okay. There's been a request for reevaluation of our troops in Iraq, and she's asking for comment. I'm going to start with Mr. King.
A policy in Iraq in every dangerous part of the world has to constantly be reevaluated. I've been to Iraq several times myself. I've met with a number of generals. I meet with soldiers when they come back. I meet with soldiers before they go over. In fact, I visited a number of troops from New York when I'm in Iraq. We have to constantly reevaluate the policy. And, for instance, should we be giving more autonomy to the Kurds, to the Shiites, and the Sunnis? All of that, to me, is something that has to be on the table. But the bottom line is, we cannot be setting arbitrary dates for withdrawal. The National Intelligence Estimate said, not when you read the front page of the New York Times, but when you read it in total, what it said is that, yes, there are more terrorists in Iraq. On the other hand, it also means that if we are successful in Iraq, it will be a massive blow against international terrorism. And also, if democracy can in any way take root in Iraq, it will also be a massive blow against terrorism. For us to give any kind of a timetable, a public timetable, we can have one privately, between the president, the generals, the commanders in the field, but if we announce any type of public date for withdrawal, what we do is we tip off the enemy, we let the enemy know what our plan is, and they can wait us out and run out the clock. And Iraq, in an unstable Iraq, in Iraq where the United States is gone and the Shiites take over, dealing with Iran, or the Sunnis take over and deal with Al-Qaeda, it would be an absolute disaster. It would be a disaster for the Middle East, it would be a disaster for the world. We pulled out of Somalia too early in 1993, and we saw what happened after that. We saw Cobalt Towers, we saw the USS Cole. We saw, obviously, in September 11th, the ultimate horror, and that was the attack on the World Trade Center. Withdrawal only encourages the enemy, and the war we're engaged in against Islamic terrorism, we can never, ever encourage that enemy.
Thank you.
Now, I'm not a military commander, and I'm not on the ground in Iraq. And if I was, this president wouldn't listen to me anyway. And that's the problem. The politicians are running this war, not the military commanders. And that's part of the problem here. You know, Peter King wants to rubber stamp George Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld in the war in Iraq. He has said that Iraq is 95% secure and stable, that downtown Baghdad is as safe as downtown Manhattan, and that the war in Iraq has been a tremendous victory in the war on terrorism, and he's wrong. Now, the fact is, what we need to do in Iraq is what James Baker is saying we should do, and that's consider a change of course. We need to make sure that our Joint Chiefs of Staff are working with our military commanders on the ground to redeploy our troops from Iraq to Afghanistan. We cut and run from Afghanistan. The Taliban is making a resurgence. They have grown the largest crop possibly in the history of civilization of opium, and they're going to use the profits from that drug trade to fund terrorism throughout the world. 5 years later, after 9/11, we still have not hunted down and killed bin Laden. That's a crime. We should redeploy our troops to Iraq and to other hotspots throughout the world, Iran, Korea. We're seeing terrorism throughout the world. And with the rest of our troops, we should bring them home to guard our ports and our airports and our borders with Mexico and Canada, because we still haven't done the job that we need to do in this country of protecting our homeland security. So we do need a change of course in Iraq. The politicians should not be running this war. The military commanders should. Our young men and women are fighting and dying over there. They deserve better. They deserve a congressman who's going to ask tough questions, demand a plan and the strategy, because I know our young people over there that are fighting for our freedom deserve that much.
We went,
Okay.
I don't get to use it twice, is that
Only twice.
I just wanted to somehow work out something between ourselves. We just give each other 30 seconds, a minute after each of these, rather than...
No, just twice, that's
No?
it.
Okay. I was just hoping that, in the interest of discourse. Okay, let me try to address things, because obviously Iraq is a major issue, and if he only gets to wave this card twice, might as well do it once on Iraq, because we're talking about American lives. And on that issue, first of all, when I said 95%, I would stand by that. Anyone who's been to Iraq, if you've been to Iraq, you know what I'm talking about, that there are parts of the country that are stable, there are parts of the country that are deadly, and you don't know when it's going to happen. I was on a convoy along the highway when a bomb went off. The point was, a bomb went off, we were almost killed, and then we went through the city, and the city was perfectly stable. It shows how dangerous it is, but how stable it is at the same time. And that's the dichotomy of Iraq that has to be addressed. Now, as far as saying we cut and run Afghanistan, what we've done in Afghanistan is have multilateral forces. We're using the British, we're using NATO, we're using the Canadians, which is what people say we should be doing. Now, if you're saying we'd ask the British and the Canadians and the others to leave, and have us go in there unilaterally, that actually defeats the whole purpose of having an alliance. And that's what we are doing in Afghanistan. And to say we cut and run really totally misunderstands the most basic concepts of military policy. And I think you said we should have troops at our ports and our airports. I think that would violate posse comitatus. We can't use American troops in this country. I don't know of anyone who's saying we should use American troops at our ports and at our airports. I mean, that would have federal troops there on a regular basis. Talk about overextending troops. And I don't know, what ports did you send them to? What ports need American troops? What we need is technology, which is what we're getting.
I'll use my red card also then, because this is too serious of an issue not to respond. First of all, the National Intelligence Estimate, which is the most credible report produced by our nation's intelligence agency, said the war in Iraq is making us less safe. That's number one. Number two, you talk about a multilateral force in Afghanistan. Why didn't you ask for a multilateral force in Iraq before we went in there? I think that would have been a little bit better to have the world on our side in that war in Iraq. And the other thing is, you know, I still haven't heard a plan. I haven't heard a plan to win this war. I haven't heard an exit strategy. I haven't heard what we're going to do with our military personnel that's overstretched. You know, and that's the problem. And this is your clear choice in this election. Do you want someone who's going to rubber stamp George Bush and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and just go along with what they're doing? Or do you want someone that's going to ask tough questions and get real answers about what our plan is in Iraq? Because our troops, our young men and women deserve better. And that's what this campaign is all about. This is really a microcosm of the choice that people have this year. Do you want a rubber stamp for George Bush? Someone who thanks God that George Bush is the president and says he's George Bush's man in Congress? Or do you want someone that's going to ask tough questions? Look, we need to go, the first thing I'm going to do when I get to Congress is ask tough questions. I approve that I'm independent. And, you know, in the Nassau County Legislature, when the legislators tried to raise their own pay 90%, I fought it and defeated it. I'm the first legislator in the history of the county to get stripped of his own committee chairmanship for going against his own party. And I would do it again. But Peter King is playing politics so he can get a committee chairmanship and be the chair of Homeland Security. And as chair of Homeland Security, what has he delivered for you? A 40% cut in our Homeland Security funding for New York, an $83 million cut. We have not implemented the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission. They've given us failing grades, D's and F's to our government for our Homeland Security. That 40%, that $83 million, still has not been restored to our state. Right here in New York, one of the biggest target in the world for terrorism. So we have a long way to go. We have a lot of tough questions to ask. Our young men and women deserve better in the military. People here at home deserve better to know when their family members are going to come home. And when I talk about airports and ports, I'm talking about the 3% of ports where we check cargo every year, the 5% of the containers that go on the planes that are checked. That's why we need more help at our airports and ports, because we haven't done the job here at home.